that this is the moment that needs to be celebrated in this year at that time, because that brought everything that I wanted to do together.
Kwame Daniels.
Hello.
What is your favourite thing about Belfast?
My favourite thing about Belfast, I'm going to say, it's a bit intricate, but the critical mass of people that I feel are moving in the right direction from a cultural and creative point of view.
A critical mass of people moving in the right direction from a creative cultural point of view. Can I paraphrase that, put words in your mouth?
Yeah.
Do you mean the energy that this city has?
I do, but I mean the energy that it has at this particular time.
Yeah.
I've been here, I've been in Belfast 11 years, I've been Northern Ireland coming up 30 years.
Yeah.
But the energy that is happening, I'm not going to say now, I'm going to say over the last 5 or 6 years, it's been a palpable energy that I really feel is moving things in a seismic way in the cultural and creative sectors. Yeah.
Do you know, you just reminded me, there was during the downtimes of COVID, there was a lot of people talking about how the Roaring Twenties came off the back of the Spanish influenza pandemic, which shut down most of Europe, the US, and those times people were forced indoors were horrific, but actually led to a cultural explosion which defined the 20s. Is it, maybe without making too much of it, is it that sort of, there's been a squeeze and now there's a whoosh, is that the output of it? Yeah,
I think there was always going to be a massive kickback in terms of everything even leading up into COVID, and then what we experienced during that time and coming out. There was a lot that people wanted to say, and they were saying it during that time, but they were able to almost say it, and people were able to be in the same room and feel it as well. And that's the thing that feels like it's just being transmitted and being amplified further and further, you know?
Okay. So is that almost what's behind North Star? So you're the creative director of North Star. And tell us just the background to the project real quick, and then we'll dive into kind of how that came about.
Wow. I mean, I'm going to try and keep this short.
I say real quick. You know, look, come on, this is your show, right? It's your podcast. Talk as long as you want.
But it came from, I mean, long story short, it came from a moment, 2020, the murder of George Floyd.
Yeah.
That's how the overarching project that is Solab came about. And from Solab, essentially Solab was about really bringing people closer to black culture and black people in that moment, because the conversations that were happening as a result of that moment in the murder of George Floyd, the conversations were, I mean, for me, I wanted to positively contribute to those conversations. Let's say that, because there were some things that were bandied about and myths and that were just like, this is crazy, and we really need to do something about this. So that's how, in my head, I was like, how do we bring people closer to black culture and black creativity, but bring everyone along? It was at the same point that myself and the creative producer, Rachael Campbell-Palmer, were about to go to Kenya and Ghana. We couldn't go because of lockdown. And we were still trying to find a way of connecting with those artists, but remotely. Mm-hmm. So between those two moments, I'm like, hold on, what can we do? Solab came about. And essentially the name Solab is about experimentation, self-expression, and the so is just like, look, what else is there to do? Let's create. So from that became Solab. But then the opportunity for North Star came about through Belfast 2024, which is this year, the year of creativity. Mm-hmm. And in that there was an opportunity to essentially tender for a large scale activity. North Star was the one, because at that moment, the unveiling of Frederick Douglass's statue, that was happening. I'd known of his visit beforehand, but that really sort of almost reset it in my head again. And thinking of that being a moment in this city's history that really hadn't been hollered about. That North Star being the name of the paper that he was essentially editor of, that he had created an editor of. I'm like, that's it. That this is the moment that needs to be celebrated in this year at that time, because that brought everything that I wanted to do together.
Yeah.
So that's how it came about.
So what, from that point, the end point is going to be 2 days in October, 24th Thursday, 25th Friday, of a show taking place in the Belfast Telegraph building,
Absolutely.
right in the heart of Belfast, in possibly its coolest venue. But there's a lot happened between that idea and that funding application and those events happening.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the creative process initially, right? You know, this is your creative director. This has got your fingerprints all across it. How did you go from, we're going to use Frederick Douglass to what the project is now, and maybe even explain what the project is?
Yeah. So I suppose that process, right? So the project is, the end product is a large scale event in the Telegraph building that is going to involve up to 40 of the most, I believe, the best session musicians and talent that we have on the island of Ireland.
Yeah. Notable that you didn't ask me to play any instrument in that, but that's okay.
No, I'm sure I did. It was maybe in your spam, something like that. And that moment is a response to a quote that Frederick Douglass is at the time when he was here in 1845, and that quote being, "Wherever I'm to be a stranger, I will always have a home in Belfast." The project, the hinge is hinged on the response to that quote, which is, what is it about Belfast that would enable essentially an enslaved man on the run to feel so at home, so far away from his home? If you agree with that. If you don't agree with that, why not? Okay, so we put that question to 4 schools, north, south, east, west of Belfast. We also put that same question to our 4 lead artists and 2 guest commissions as well.
Okay, lead artists are
Nandi Jola, amazing spoken word artist. Kaidi Tatham, who is essentially our composer-in-chief, Grammy Award winner. We have Leo Miyagee, up-and-coming, amazing hip-hop artist, songwriter. Nandi Jola, Winnie Hammer.
Yep.
Another amazing sort of neo-soul pop artist who's, her flow, lyrics just absolutely made for this project. Guest commissioned from award-winning artist, actor, and friend, Colin Salmon. And another great friend, Ivor Novello Award winner, Emmy nominee, Hannah Peel.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're not already clicking in the show notes below to buy a ticket, I don't know what you're doing with your time or what you're doing with your life, right? The tickets are a steal, aren't they? They're, 20, 25 quid, something like
20
pounds. Right. So you've got Grammy Award winners, Ivor Novello winners. You've got basically... I don't know. If you haven't bought a ticket yet, what are you doing? Click the link below, go and buy a ticket. You will not regret it.
Absolutely.
So you grabbed in some of the greatest talent.
Yep.
And said, here's some words from Frederick Douglass.
Yep.
Wherever else I find myself to be a stranger, I will remember I have a home in Belfast.
Yep.
And they respond to that brief.
Yeah.
The school kids responded to the brief as well. And then you just got endless amounts of content, right? And what did you do? Sort of throw it at Kaidi and say, make that into something?
Yeah, it's a good question. So what I will say is at that point is we had this amazing content. So from the school's point of view, we brought in the creative writers, fighting words. They facilitated the sessions. Brilliant. And then we brought in some of the artists as well as guest facilitators, as well as Tara Lynn O'Neill, who is the Ma, for anyone who doesn't know, the Ma and Derry Girls. It's famous across the world. She ran amazing sessions, basically in terms of like intention, best way to self-express, the importance of intention. So those workshops were amazing in helping to generate and help those young people, I suppose, communicate what their response to those questions were. So they were as written responses, but we then recorded them. Our project manager, Graham, comes in, records them all. So we have nearly 100 responses in terms of from the schools, as well as from the artists as well. So what we do then is, we edit that down to a certain point, and Kaidi's in there. He knows what's coming, and from that is helping to shape his own response as well, but also begins to give us a structure in terms of what the whole show could look and feel like based on all these responses coming back from the lead artists as well as from the pupils.
And just in case this wasn't going to be a huge technical challenge at the best of times, you also decided to cap the time on it, didn't you?
Yeah.
So what's the time and what's the significance of that as well?
So the time is 77 minutes. The reason being, Frederick Douglass lived till 77 years of age. And I'm like, right, if we're going to go in on this everything has to have a reason.
Yep.
From the length of the show to the responses to everyone involved, there's a reason. It's all about the intention of all. Yeah.
And you, the wonderful and horrible thing about working with creatives is that creatives never stop thinking. They never stop, and they don't think small. They just add and add and add to a project. So you're 3 months away from kind of curtain up moment for this event, and then you decided to add something else into the project as well.
Yeah, are we talking on the tech front here?
Tech front, studio albums?
Yeah.
Or...
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, there's a couple of layers to this. Yeah, so yeah, we thought, well, while we're actually, because, right, we'll start from this. All of this is going to be in surround sound, okay? So there's a creative process that has to happen in terms of how you prepare content to be then distributed in a 360-degree circle.
We may well do a podcast on this because I think there's a bunch of tech geeks who are going to love going deep on this. But it's incredible, isn't it, how it comes together? Yeah.
It's so they're like, look, in order for us to do this, we need that content, in advance of the show. Perfect. So I'm like, well, while we create that content for them to have, we might as well just record everything. Let's record everything, and then we can give the spatial engineers everything they want, and they can pick and choose, and we have that discussion. So I'm like, let's just make an album. So we get everyone in the studio and we are laying down a full album for the show. So that's one little layer. And then another layer is, well, even in terms of when you walk into the venue, it's not just going to be your conventional stage. You're going to have a stage, but then we're going to have 3 plinths within the venue, so the audience are within the performance. So anyone in the audience can turn to the left or right, and there will be next to one of those lead artists in the audience. So we've got spatial audio, we've got that. And then to add another layer onto it, we're like, well, why don't we just film the whole thing? So we're documenting, we're running a full live recording of the project in terms of the audio of the event, in terms of audio, but we're also filming it. So yeah, there's a few spinning plates. Yeah,
brilliant. I mean, what else would you be doing with your time, right?
Exactly.
So, so this event is all coming together for the end of October. The artists have been commissioned, and you kind of, when we're recording this today, that's the final lap started really to get it all put together. We're at that sort of stage, aren't we?
Yeah, definitely. It's at the stage where everything's in front of us.
Yep.
All the pieces are there, and we're starting to essentially create what the timeline of this whole show is going to be. Because me, from the DJing background, I want it to be this continuous performance.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's not just about performing a song, finish. This is something that will be a continuous. So it's not only about learning the songs, but it's about the segues.
Yeah.
It's how you go from one performance to another. And all of that is going to be, planned in minute detail. Whether we stick to that is another thing. But the Virgo head that is me says everyone will have everything that they need to make this happen.
Fantastic. Right, so this is an interesting time for Belfast. You are not from Belfast, as your accent gives you away a little bit, but you said 20 years Northern Ireland, you lived in Derry for a bit, you lived in Belfast for a bit. Your kids are Belfast through and through, though, right? And
totally.
We talked with other guests about home and what this concept means, and I almost want to throw Frederick Douglass's quote at you and say, wherever else I feel myself to be a stranger, I will remember I have a home in Belfast. What does that mean to you?
Oh, wow. There's a question. What it means to me is essentially, it's where my family is. It's where my wife is. It's where my 2 sons are. It's where I've got a lovely network of friends. It's where I'm loving my personal, my private life, my professional life. But really home is my family. It's my wife and my 2 kids. That's it. But it also means somewhere that enables me to be myself. That's a work in progress.
Yeah.
In the sense of, I was brought up in London, and I suppose in that sense there's a lot of me that I felt very much at home in London from a cultural point of view, going out, clubbing wise, music, different cultures, different people, different backgrounds, all that sort of thing. That is me. I absolutely thrive in that.
Yeah.
yes, we have that here. I'm happy here, but I think there's definitely work to do in that sense that really does enable those other cultures to really enable themselves, enable them to be themselves and fully be within their own cultures, but still be considered, a citizen of Belfast, and for them to call it home as well. I think when that happens, it will even heighten my love of the city. Absolutely.
We're still within touching distance of riots in Belfast recently. Ethnic minorities targeted. Like in the last days or two, there's been ethnic minorities being burnt out of houses, being targeted, and things like that. So I don't want to downplay the fact that there are challenges and there are problems here in Belfast. But do you feel that the day that you look for in terms of when you can be yourself and communities can be yourself, do you feel we're heading in the right direction towards that? I'm not saying there's not work to do, but do you, progress is never a straight line. It's always up and down a little bit. It's like a heart rate monitor. But do you think we're generally tracking in the right direction or not?
No, I do think we are. I absolutely do think we are. And what here, it's funny, I was saying this to our creative director, Rachael, yesterday. It was a thing that I saw on Insta, and it was about, I can't think what the context was, but essentially the video I'd sent was talking about an area of the world that wasn't great at talking and communicating and being real. I know what it was. Actually, it was talking about Ghanaians. That's what it was. Hail up the Ghanaians. But it was talking about how essentially you will always know there's a problem. There will never be this passive aggressive A, B, and C. And they were talking about Ghanaians not having that, but they were talking about other parts of the world. They were talking about other parts essentially of Great Britain, United Kingdom that did have that. But what I said to Rachael was, what I will say about the island of Ireland is that isn't the case. The reason being, I think despite all the madness, people are good at putting things down on the table and going, I have a problem with this and this is why. And whether they come to an agreement or not, it's by the by. The fact of the matter is, people are good at talking here. And if they weren't good at talking, then I don't think the progress that has been made in the last 35, 40 years would have happened. And I'm going to bring it back to when I first arrived in 1997. So it's at the tail end, there's still army on the streets. It's still all going off. Yeah. To get from that moment to me sitting here talking about putting on North Star, that is essentially talking about a moment where a black man travels from the US to here, and we're celebrating that moment, and we're bringing everyone along for a moment that this city should be proud of. For me to be able to do that, that if that isn't progress, I don't know what is. But yes, there's work to do, but it's absolutely moving in the right direction. Yeah,
I think I'm slightly newer in Northern Ireland than you. I'm kind of 14 years now, and I say regularly, I think maybe there's a little bit of distance that not being born here gives you, in that I'm really positive about the direction of travel Northern Ireland is taking generally. And again, there are ups and there are downs. But if you roll back to what life must have been like here in the 90s and the 80s and the 70s, if you offered people what we have now, they would have bitten your arm off for it. Absolutely. That's not to say that we're not without problems. It's not to say that there aren't things that need fixing and are being dodged. And, but the direction of travel is generally up, isn't it? And hopefully events like this can turbocharge that and push it in the right direction.
So totally. And that's the thing. And we can't, we have to remain positive. We have to be realistic, but positive in that it is moving in the right direction. We have to keep on putting that work in, but I believe we're heading in the right direction for sure. That's what I'm saying.
So pull it back to North Star. People are listening to this thinking, am I going to buy a ticket? We've talked about the artists, we've talked about the sort of tech challenges and things that are going to be on there, but what one line or couple of sentences, if I'm sat listening to this, my headphones on at home thinking, I'm going to message a mate and say we've got to go to North Star, what should I put in that message?
What should you put in that message? I think what you should put in that message is this is an opportunity to hear some of the best musicians on this island, number one, performing and playing in a moment that is an absolute celebration of Belfast. It's a celebration of Belfast on so many levels. It's a celebration of the fact that in 1845, pretty much they were like, no, we are not involving ourselves
Yeah.
in the illegal transportation of people. We're not doing it. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, if we fast forward it to now, is Belfast said no in 1845. We've just come through a moment where 15,000 people went onto the street and said no to racism and Islamophobia.
Yeah.
This is another moment to amplify that moment. So you've got two moments that this city should be unbelievably proud of.
Yeah.
In that message, you'd have to paraphrase all that, but in that message, it's like, essentially, come and celebrate an amazing moment with amazing artists. That would be it.
It's a good job this is not the old days where you used to have to pay for every 140 characters in the text message, because you just bankrupt. There's no money for tickets now. So it is going to be this incredible event. And is there any significance to it being in the Belfast Telegraph building?
Yeah, I mean, we went for number one, I suppose, the proximity to the statue, to Frederick Douglass's statue. You know, it's a few hundred yards away from where he spoke, where his statue is now. Also, I think that the fact that Telegraph building, newspaper, you know, where the paper was printed, North Star being Frederick Douglass's newspaper.
Yep.
But also, I love the fact that we are taking a moment in 1845 and putting it in a venue that is essentially, I mean, it's known for a broad range of events, but essentially the first type of music was essentially electronic dance music. So to take a moment from, you know, nearly 200 years ago and put it in a venue that is known for that, for me, I love that idea of almost like, you know, just that almost sort of, you know, bringing together those two moments.
Fusion of cultures and ethoses and things. And I think that's almost what Belfast is about, isn't it? You know, in terms of industry and outlook and people and places and names. And, you know, we're just a big melting pot. And I think people forget that sometimes.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's, you know, again, within that, there's so much. Again, I'm having this conversation with with Cy Francis. He's essentially leading on sort of the tech and the musical direction of it. So, you know, and we were talking about the amount of people that are doing things on an international level that live here that you would not know. Yeah, do you know what I mean? And there's almost that same thing in terms of the amount of almost subcultures that are bubbling here. It's all it is that time and that platform for that to come to the fore, because everyone's a winner. If everyone can share in those, you know, in those little sort of areas of culture and creativity that are happening in the city and beyond, like that, for me, if we can start bringing all that to the surface, the offer for this city, I think, it's immense, you know.
Excellent. Well, look, showing my lack of skill as a podcast host, there is no cool segue or clever little link between that last bit and what I'm going to ask you next. It's just a hard landing for the plane, right? Okay. We've got time for one more story. I need you to tell me about Hamilton the musical and how that becomes relevant to North Star.
This was a crazy one. So I'll try to keep this one quick, but there was Frederick Douglass Week. It happened to be in Belfast this year. So as part of that, we were brought on board, you know, helping to deliver the week with certain sessions. But one of the things that came to the fore was the fact that there were two former members of the Hamilton cast that were coming over
from the West End in London.
Yes. Yeah. To run workshops, and would we be interested? And we're like, well, yes, of course. So what we did is at the four schools that we brought together. So it was Leighton College, Ashfield Girls, St Colum's School, and Blessed Trinity College. Yeah. So those are four. So we brought a selection of students from each of those into a masterclass, which was held in Blessed Trinity College, and we got the two actors from Hamilton. So we got Paul Oakley Stovall and Nihal Sabu. I want to get those names right. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they are. They were at the workshop, the masterclass, and what they did was they took selections of the works that had been created, and with the students' help, they reinterpreted that. So one of these were all poems, essentially, or responses to that quote. And they took them and they turned it into, one of them they turned into a song, one they turned into a news interview, one they turned into it was almost like an article, one they turned into like a call and response. It was it was one of the most powerful workshops I've ever sat in. But in terms of facilitation, how you segue between different art forms and means of communication, it was unreal.
Brilliant.
So that's the link to the and very quickly then. So then when we were in New York, we were invited over by the Dead Rabbit.
Yep.
To essentially on Juneteenth to again mark that moment that links, that day and the US to Northern Ireland. So we're over there. We're in New York. We took Joseph Leighton, who's playing guitar, and Winnie Hammer.
Yeah.
So we went over there, and there was an event. Essentially, there was a Q&A. Fine. The next day, I'm out, downtime. There's an event going on in the middle of New York, and I thought it was a DJ playing. I go around, it's this 15-piece band. It's like, oh man. And as I walk, I'm like, I know that guy on stage. So I look there, and it turns out it's Paul. So I'm like, right, do I go and say hello? He's mid-performer, so I'm like, no, but I'll go up and see if I can catch his eye even. So as I walk up, I stand at the front, and I look to my left, and I'm like, I know him. And it's Nihil. And I'm like, you are kidding. So the two guys were basically leading the Hamilton workshops, standing next to me in the middle of New York. So, yeah,
brilliant.
There you go. Yeah.
Brilliant. Right, as we wrap up,
yeah,
I've got one more thing for you to do.
Yeah.
I need you to answer me the great Belfast debate.
Yeah.
Which is better?
Yeah.
Soda bread, potato bread?
Oh, soda bread or potato bread?
It's what the people want to know.
Yeah, it's potato bread.
Okay. Listen, you heard it here first. Kwame Daniels, creative director at North Star. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Absolute pleasure. Thank you.